Welcome to our 41st Annual Salute to the Parks. I'm Teresa Pierno, President and CEO of the National Parks Conservation Association. I fell in love with the outdoors as a child, playing in the woods near my home in New Jersey. And today you can find me sailing my boat on the Chesapeake Bay, which I hope will one day have its own place within our national park system. I am so proud to serve in this role, and it is my absolute pleasure to welcome you to our virtual celebration tonight. While some of us will be together in person in DC, we're thrilled to share the evening with you and the rest of our park community across the country. I want to thank our generous host sponsors, Bruce and Diana Rauner, whose contribution made it possible for us to offer this event free for all of you. Tonight is going to be so special. We are honoring three incredible national park storytellers and protectors: Molly Hennessy-Fiske, Rocca, and David Vela. They've used their voices and their platforms to teach us about our nation's history. They've shown us the power of place and the power of making sure all are welcome in them. And they've reminded us time and again, national parks unite us. I'm looking forward to the conversation with them later, and I know you are too. Now I invite you to look to the left of your screen. There you'll see so many ways you can engage with us throughout the evening. We have a very exciting silent auction with donated items and experiences you can bid on. All proceeds help fund NPCA's work. You can also test your knowledge with park trivia. I'll warn you, it's not as easy as it sounds. And please join in the conversation with your fellow virtual participants in the chat. You'll find the box on the bottom right of your screen. And finally, if you're moved during tonight's program, I invite you to donate to our critical park protection work using the button on the left of your screen. As you participate in these activities, you'll continue to hear our program, so you won't miss a thing. Now I'd like to introduce you to our first special guest of the evening, a true friend to NPCA and a champion for our national parks, Elizabeth Waddell.
Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Waddell, and I'm the very proud chair of the National Parks Conservation Association Board of Trustees. I'm speaking to you tonight from my home in Fort Worth, Texas. It's here in my home state where I was first introduced to the work of NPCA. My garden club in Beaumont, Texas, got involved with NPCA restoring the longleaf pine ecosystem of the Big Thicket National Preserve with the Texas NPCA regional team. It felt so great to plant seedlings with my dibble bar and know I was helping restore an ecosystem that creates needed habitat, green infrastructure, and brings economic activity to nearby communities. It was from that experience that I knew that this organization and its mission to protect parks for future generations was one that I wanted to be a part of, and I sure love being a part of the NPCA family. You may be here tonight as a longtime NPCA supporter too. Thank you for all you do to support this organization and make this work possible. And if you're new to this very worthwhile cause, welcome. We're so happy to have you with us tonight. I'd like to share with you a video about the tremendous impact NPCA has had on our national parks, made possible by all of us coming together to speak up for them, because parks need us as much as we need them. Enjoy the video and the rest of tonight's program.
It's our responsibility and our honor to protect one of America's greatest legacies, our national parks. NPCA has been proudly doing this for more than a century. We've been an independent voice standing up for the places that matter, making sure parks thrive for the next century and beyond, helping parks tell the stories of all Americans, making sure that national parks are for everyone. And here's how we're doing it. We're building partnerships in park communities, elevating forgotten voices and histories, bringing local issues to national attention, telling stories that connect us, welcoming new members and new parks. When you think about it, by visiting a park, you're also protecting its legacy. You're fulfilling the purpose of the place, continuing the story, sharing the experience, joining a community. And that's how we'll ensure these places and the history they hold will endure. So, to all who love our parks, to all who speak up for them, to all who take a friend to experience one, thank you for joining us on this journey. Our parks are not going anywhere, and neither are we.
Thank you, Elizabeth, for all you do to inspire us every day. For more than 100 years, NPCA has spoken up and spoken out to protect our national parks, to safeguard public lands, water, air, and wildlife, to ensure America's history is told with truth and authenticity, and to ensure everyone has access to these incredible places. This national park protection work is only possible because of all of you. NPCA's founder said more than a century ago that it would be the people who would save their own national parks. It was true then, and it's true today. I know because it's you who made these recent park victories possible. Take a look. These are such important wins for our national parks and the millions of people who visit them each year. Together, we're leaving an important legacy that will live on long after us. And now, please meet a very special guest, a national park protector.
Hello, I'm Lisa Ling. I'm a mother, journalist, and lover of our amazing national parks. Throughout my career and with my family, I've had the opportunity to explore so many of our national parks. The places that have shaped our nation's history and the places that offer some of the most awe-inspiring views I've ever seen. That's the power of our parks. They unite us with nature, with our shared history, and with each other. They ensure our stories are told and never forgotten. From the mystique of Joshua trees to the barracks at Amachi and Manzanar to the memorial gardens at Cesar Chavez. So many of these places have forever changed history and helped shape our future. And the National Park Conservation Association is leading the way. I hope you'll join me in supporting NPCA's work to not only protect the places we all love, but to expand and advocate for new parks, and in doing so, make them more inclusive and welcoming for all of us.
Thank you for being with us this evening. And before we head over to the live event, I have just one more person I'd like you to meet. Priya Nanjaba is NPCA's Vice President of Conservation Programs. For more than 2 decades, she's been using her background in science to protect our natural world, from safeguarding wildlife and their habitats to combating climate change. Priya has been on the front lines of conservation. And tonight, we're so fortunate to have her moderate our honoree discussion. Priya?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Priya Nanjapa. I want to thank you all for joining us for the 41st Annual Salute to the Parks. Our national parks are a vital part of our country's heritage and a source of pride for all Americans. My father emigrated here to the United States in the 1960s, and as he traveled all around the country, he visited many national parks and fell in love with them. When my brother and I were old enough, he took us to as many as he could, and it definitely drove me towards my career in conservation. I'm so excited to be here tonight as the Vice President of Conservation Programs for NPCA, and I'm especially thrilled to moderate tonight's panel. We're honoring 3 people who have gone above and beyond in their efforts to speak to the needs of creating a more inclusive landscape. Their work and commitment serve as a reminder that every single one of us has a role to play in safeguarding the wonders of our parks and inspiring a new generation of park lovers, just as my father did for me. These honorees believe, as NPCA does, that the idea of loving parks means more to us. It means committing to acknowledging the full history of the American story. It means meeting today's challenges of climate change. And it means raising the next century of park supporters to ensure that parks thrive for years to come. Supporting our parks is not just a moment. It's a continued movement that allows these longstanding monuments to create a more welcoming and equitable environment for all of us who visit. We are so glad to have you join us. Please enjoy the program.
Thank you so much, Priya. And now I am so honored to invite you to join us live from the Building Museum in Washington, D.C. I hope you enjoy the program, and I'll see you again after the panel discussion.
Ladies and gentlemen, we invite you to watch a special message from singer, songwriter, and outdoor enthusiast, Jewel.
Hi, it's Jewel, and I am here to celebrate all the incredible parks in our beautiful country and those people that help protect them. Being in big nature is big medicine, and it is so important that everybody have access to nature and the incredible healing powers that it offers us. It resets our nervous systems, it reminds us of our size in a healthy way, and most importantly, it gives us a relationship with the world around us. And we can't value what we don't have a relationship to. So today I celebrate the NPCA, I celebrate all those people who protect it. Thank you for all that you do.
Please welcome to the stage NPCA's President and CEO, Teresa Pierno.
Good evening and welcome to the 41st Annual Salute to the Parks. And thank you to all of you who are joining us here in person at the National Building Museum in Washington, D.C. We gratefully acknowledge the Native peoples whose ancestral homelands we gather tonight, as well as the diverse and vibrant Native communities who make their home here today. And we welcome our guests who are joining us virtually all across the country. Thank you for being with us. In fact, I'm proud to share that once again this year, we have guests from all 50 states and the District of Columbia. This is just, yes, let's clap for that. This is just one more example of how national parks truly unite us as a country. I want to take a moment to express my gratitude to our host committee, sponsors, silent auction donors who did so much to make this night possible. And special thank you to our generous host sponsors, Bruce and Diana Rauner, whose contribution made it possible for us to offer this event free to all virtual participants. So that's really important. And a very warm welcome to past NPCA award winners who are joining us this evening, as well as members of Congress, those representing the administration, and our partner organizations. We're honored to be joined by the current National Park Service Director, Director Chuck Sams, former Park Service Director Bob Stanton, and former Acting Director and Honoree David Vela. and 3 generations of Mather family whose relative, Stephen Mather, was the very first director of the National Park Service and one of MPCA's founders. You are all such strong park allies, and we thank you. We're here tonight to celebrate our national parks, all our national parks. While many people just think of the 63 places designated as national parks, Acadia, the Everglades, Grand Canyon, we know there are 424 national park sites found in every state and territory. And these parks are as diverse as America itself. Parkways, preserves, battlefields, seashores, historic homes, and ancient dwellings. Places where history was made, the triumphant and the tragic. And each of these park sites has its own story to tell. We just have to be open to listening. Last fall, I was fortunate to visit Great Smoky Mountains National Park with some of you here tonight. We took in the fall foliage, we walked the trails, we learned about the native plants, we looked for bears in Cades Cove. Sadly, didn't see any. But all the things that most people do while visiting our special parks. But it wasn't until we spent time with Ranger Antone Fletcher that the park really spoke to me. Ranger Fletcher leads the park's African American Experience Project, an effort to share the largely untold African American history of the Smokies. Our group walked a path with him that took us to crumbling foundations that were once homes. There he told us stories about the enslaved people who not only farmed the land, but knew it so well they served as guides for others. People who once finally freed stayed on the land that they felt so connected to. And as I listened to Ranger Fletcher, I imagined the families cooking meals and telling stories around their campfires. And I found myself scanning the landscape, looking for the African American cemeteries he and his team are uncovering to help us better understand the last several centuries of life in the Smokies. Ranger Fletcher left us with these parting words. African Americans have been here, but their stories haven't been told, and we're trying to change that. The power of place is so real. Our national parks bring history alive, even history that's been tucked away for far too long. This is what we're working for. This is what our children's children will inherit. This is what all of us are working to protect. And thanks to you, we're succeeding. This year, we have so many park victories to celebrate with you. Here are just a few. Working with Republicans and Democrats in Congress, we helped establish the Blackwell School National Historic Site in Marfa, Texas. Yeah. One of the first national park sites dedicated to modern Latino history. We helped secure $1.5 billion in disaster funding for Yellowstone, Lake Mead, Vicksburg, and other parks hit hard by last year's natural disasters. And we helped secure $1.1 billion for Everglades restoration, the largest ever federal investment in this fragile ecosystem. And yes, Marie, we should clap for that. And just a few months ago, working with a community of voices from tribal leaders to business leaders, we helped stop the proposed Pebble Mine. Woohoo! Safeguarding Alaska's Bristol Bay watershed and the brown bears of Katmai and Lake Clark National Parks. And just a few days ago, we celebrated the establishment of Avikwame, the national monument in southern Nevada, yes. It's protecting some of the most visually stunning and biologically diverse and culturally significant lands in the Mojave Desert. These are just some of the many ways that we've succeeded in protecting our lands and our history this year. Thank you for being part of this work this year and every year. Together, we're leaving a lasting legacy for our children and their children.
My favorite park is the one with all the trees. Wow. It just goes on and on forever. I like that I can be myself here. Celebrate my heritage. I can scream as loud as I want here. Shh. Not here. I love that parks tell a story. Tell my story. Our story. How did those get so big? This is where I make the best memories. Mom, you gotta see this.
I am proud to share that many of the children in this video are the children of NPCA staff members. Filmed just a few weeks ago at 3 of our local DC National Park sites. I am so hopeful knowing that our future park protectors are at work already. And now for the highlight of our program. We have the honor of recognizing 3 people who have used their platforms and their voices on behalf of our national parks. Molly Hennessy-Fiske, award-winning journalist, and this year's Robin W. Winks Award winner. Each year, NPCA gives this award to a person or an organization that communicates to the public the values of our national parks. The Blackwell School in Marfa, Texas, was a segregated school for Hispanic children in the first half of the 20th century. Through her tireless reporting for the Los Angeles Times, Molly shined an important light on this schoolhouse, the students who attended, and the stories it told. Now, as one of our country's newest national park sites, those stories are shared with all who visit the site. Unfortunately, Molly could not be here with us this evening, but I'd like you to meet a few people who want to share with you why she's so deserving of this award, and then you'll hear from Molly herself.
Molly and I have covered so many different kinds of stories together. And one of the things I've always appreciated about her is her absolute professionalism, her commitment to getting things right, to being fair.
Molly, for me, really seems to have a commitment to telling stories that are compelling and that are about people and about communities that are being affected by systems and that are under-resourced and unique and interesting places. And for me, that's what the Blackwell School is.
Although it is a painful part of our past, Molly recognized the importance of telling this story to ensure that we never repeat it. Thanks to Molly's reporting, a new generation of Americans now know the shameful history of Latino segregation in Marfa, Texas.
We heard from lots of readers from all over the country who said, that's what happened to me. This is what happened at my school, or this is what happened to my mom and dad. And thank you. That was the other thing. People saying, thank you for telling this story. And that's when you know you're doing the right thing as a journalist.
And it's such a thrill to see somebody who uses their talents to be able to tell those stories in a way that is impactful and that elevates those experiences in places that they definitely deserve to be elevated in.
Congratulations, Molly, on this well-deserved Robin W. Winks Award. And thank you again for what you've done to tell the full story of America.
Hi, I'm Molly Hennessy-Fiske. I'm a national correspondent for the Washington Post. When I was reporting these stories, I was at the Los Angeles Times. I had been covering Texas for more than 10 years, and I had been out to Marfa to West Texas numerous times. I love the wide open spaces, the parks, both national and state, but I had no idea that the Blackwell School existed. I'd passed by the site many times and didn't know the history at all. So working on these stories was an amazing opportunity to both learn the history and to share it. I was really excited that the stories ran in print, but also in audio, in a podcast, and video, so that the graduates of the Blackwell School could share their stories like they did with me, with the readers and viewers across the country. So thank you to the National Parks Conservation Association for honoring these stories, for drawing more attention to the Blackwell School and the graduates. I brought a little bit of West Texas back with me, this bit of tumbleweed, but I also brought the stories which stuck with me, and I'm hoping someday to get back out to West Texas to visit the site myself. So thanks again for this amazing award. I'm really sorry that I couldn't be there in person to accept it. I have a new baby, a baby girl, who was born in December, so I'm still working with her. But thank you so much, and congratulations on another year of really important work.
Congratulations, Molly. Mo Rocca, Emmy-winning correspondent and television host, will receive this year's Centennial Leadership Award. It recognizes a public or private citizen who has made an outstanding contribution towards ensuring our national parks are ready for the second century. You may have seen Mo's pieces on CBS Sunday Morning, or heard his podcast, Mobituaries, Great Lives Worth Living, or as a panelist on NPR's Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me, or even his CBS series, Innovation Nation. No matter where you've heard Mo, one thing always comes through: his ability to tell an incredible story. Whether it's about our country's quirkier presidents, or Harriet Tubman, or even the wolves of Yellowstone, Mo brings history alive for his audiences, including the history found in our national parks. So now, please meet a few people who would like to tell you about Mo's work.
Oh, hello. This is Allie Ward of Innovation Nation with Mo Rocca, which is how I met Mo Rocca. I've gotten to work with him for almost 10 years now.
I met Mo Rocca when he was a freshman at Harvard, where he and my daughter became close friends. As a historian, I particularly enjoyed his company because of his interest in U.S. history and his eagerness to discuss it in such marvelous detail, especially if it concerned national historic sites or parks.
Mo Rocca is one of the great journalists working today, in my opinion. He represents the best of the profession with his instinctual interest in stories and people and things and history and culture.
Mo Rocca is not only as genuine and warm and funny and smart and professional as you see on TV, but he's also so curious and so present and so personable and so likable one-on-one.
What sets Mo apart from others in his field is his boundless enthusiasm.
I think that Mo's enthusiasm and his interest, I would take it even a step or two further into his intellectual curiosity about so many different kinds of things.
I just want to say, Mo, it is an absolute honor getting to share oxygen in the same room with you. You are wonderful, never change, and huge congratulations on being honored with the Centennial Leadership Award
from the National Parks Conservation Association.
It is quite wonderful and quite fitting for a person who is so, really so much a Renaissance person, because he's so interested in so many things. That, to me, speaks volumes.
Mo, please join us. And now, David Vela, a 30-year veteran of the National Park Service, will also receive the Centennial Leadership Award. David has had an impressive career in public service, taking him from the park superintendent of DC's George Washington Memorial Parkway to park sites across the country, and back again to DC, where he was acting director of the Park Service before retiring. He became known as a problem solver and a respected leader. In each of his roles, David protected our national parks, air, water, and wildlife. He worked to diversify park staff to better reflect the people of our country, and he worked to make sure our parks are more welcoming for all. Let's hear from those who want to tell you the impact David has had on our national park system.
David and I first met when I was serving as the director of the National Park Service in 1997 through January 2001.
He was just somebody who I could trust. His integrity was fully intact from the first conversation I had with him, and I knew that he's somebody we could work with.
As acting director, David Vela had a strong commitment to protecting the natural and cultural resources of our national parks. He stood up and he spoke out to help protect these places for future generations to enjoy.
And he was able to incorporate within his leadership a commitment to assuring that there is a recognition of the diversity of our nation and a diversity of our heritage resources.
One of David Vela's great lasting legacies for his involvement with national parks is the energy and enthusiasm and commitment he brought to elevating the stories of Latinos in our nation through our national parks.
David's character is impeccable. He was a fun person to work with. You know, he cares about family. He created a family-friendly atmosphere at Grand Teton National Park, and he also cares about his employees. You know, he was the acting director of the National Park Service through the COVID pandemic, and there was nothing more important to David than the safety and well-being of the National Park Service workforce and family.
David, on behalf of your friends at the National Park Foundation and in the broader partner community that support national parks, you've been a great blessing to all of us.
David, from all of us that wear the green and gray uniform, congratulations on receiving National Parks Conservation Association's Centennial Leadership Award. I can't think of anyone more deserving than you.
So David is a true park professional. He's a true colleague, but perhaps most importantly, he's my friend. He's my friend.
David, please join us. And finally, it's my pleasure to introduce you to another park champion, NPCA's Vice President of Conservation Programs, Priya Nanjaba, who will moderate tonight's conversation with our awardees. Priya has national parks in her blood. When her immigrant father came to the United States to attend graduate school, he spent much of his free time taking road trips to national parks across the country. And when Priya and her brother were old enough, he'd bring them along. That's when Priya was first introduced to the depths of the Grand Canyon and the snow-capped peaks of the Rockies. Those trips inspired her to become a conservation and biologist. Third try. Advocating for the places and animals she and her family love. We are grateful to have her at NPCA and for serving as a moderator this evening. Please join me in welcoming Priya to the stage. Of course.
Here. Well, welcome everybody here in the room and online. Really happy to have you all here. And David and Mo, thank you so much for being here as our Centennial Award winners. Really excited to hear from you this evening. I just want to thank especially Teresa for that wonderful introduction and to hear about all of the wonderful award winners, and Molly especially, who couldn't be here with us tonight. But what I want to really hear from the two of you here, and I think that all of us would love to know, what drives you to protect our nation's parks?
Sure. Well, my exposure and experience with national parks was over 50 years ago when my parents decided to take their 3 children on a road trip from Southeast Texas to a national park. It was Yellowstone, and the first visit was Grand Teton. This is an example of how one park experience can change a life, and it did for me. In fact, so much so that I knew as a teenager what I wanted to do with my life. And 40 years later, I had the opportunity of working with Kevin as the 21st superintendent of the very first national park that I witnessed and experienced. Parks are powerful. They tell stories that haven't been told. They protect resources on behalf of the American public. And so it's an honor to have had that opportunity and to work with many people in this room to do that.
Great, thank you. And Mo, what about you? What drives you to tell the stories of the park?
Well, just first I wanted to thank you and say, I'm so happy that we're winners. I had thought that we were nominees. And that after the panel, you would announce who won. So pressure's off. All right. So, you know, what Teresa said, the power of place. My kind of, not to sound grandiose about it, but let's say my Paul falling off the horse, or my origin story here is I was living, my first job in television was writing for a series called Wishbone on PBS about a dog who imagines himself as the hero. Thank you, it was a good show. And with all due respect to, certainly to the people of Texas, but I was living in a suburb of Dallas called Plano, great people there, but it was kind of sterile. And it felt like everything had been paved over, and that if something was pre-Watergate era, it would have been considered ancient. And you know, I would go to the Albertsons, the supermarket there, because I had no social life, like on a Friday night, and it was so overly air conditioned, and there would be like 35 brands of cereal, of cornflakes, and it just felt so soulless. And I'd grown up in this area, and after that experience, I said to myself, I need to know wherever I'm living that someone has lived and died here before me, wherever I am. And so from that point on, I sort of compulsively just started reading historic markers and visiting historic sites, the kinds of places that my parents dutifully brought me to on weekends growing up, and I would kind of kick and scream and be resistant to. And I have found in the stories that I tell on Sunday morning, not to get ahead of ourselves, that parks, not surprisingly, end up playing roles sometimes unexpectedly. I was at Val-Kill, where Eleanor Roosevelt, certainly as David knows, was her refuge, was her home across from Hyde Park. But there, I was told, I learned the story of how during World War I, when FDR was the Assistant Secretary to the Navy, she, as a private citizen, without any cameras there, would go to Arlington National Cemetery every day to watch servicemen who had served during World War I being interred there. And you know, Arlington National Cemetery is powerful for so many reasons, for thousands and thousands of reasons, but that story just added yet another layer, and it was a story that I wanted to tell.
That's great, thank you. Really appreciate hearing your stories. David, I would love to hear a little bit more about some of the work you've done. People who've known and worked with you know of your nonpartisan nature and the successes you've had in campaigning. What would you say that you could tell our advocates that are here today in terms of parks serving as a bridge in our divisive culture politically right now?
Well, parks bring people together. They're not only places of learning, but to to contribute time and energy and resources. And there's not a political color associated with parks. And that's the beauty of these very special places. And one of the things that I valued was the opportunity to reach across all political lines and interests, because we had one common denominator, and that was to protect our American birthright, the special places that make up the National Park Service, and those yet to be created. And so that was very helpful for me to go in with that mindset, because we did find, no matter which congressional office I was in, especially when I was going through my confirmation process, that we had common interests: people, places, and stories. And so it was a valuable lesson for me, and that's one of the things that I share with younger generations, is that you can have your core political beliefs, but if you're interested in national parks, check them aside a little bit and listen to all perspectives. They're meaningful, they're powerful, and they're important, no matter what political persuasion you find yourself in.
Yeah, I think that's so important, and it's really great that we have these, these parks, these places that are supported in a bipartisan fashion. And Mo, you've also talked about in one of your Innovation Nation stories on the creation of Yellowstone, that it happened about 7 years after the Civil War, and that it was an opportunity to heal the nation, and that you mentioned that parks are curative. Would you say that is still true today?
Well, first of all, I love what David is saying about checking your politics sort of before you go into a park. Because yeah, if you're in a national park, you can't really tell, right? It's sort of like when you're in Vegas. I was in Vegas recently. Now, I'm not saying that the Strip, although one day the Strip could actually be a national park, right? It should be, because they have a neon museum. What do you think? What do you think? You would love that, right? The first site where rangers are allowed to gamble, the only one. Yeah, I think in that piece for Innovation Nation, right, we did talk about how before 1872 and the establishment of Yellowstone, that nature was widely seen as something to be tamed, and that this was such an innovation, the opening of that park. But I certainly believe in the healing nature of these parks. I mean, I did a story at Elkhorn Ranch in North Dakota, where Teddy Roosevelt, after the single-day death of his young wife and mother in 1884, fled there, and the landscape there reshaped. There's a reason it's known, I think, still as the cradle of conservation, because it reshaped how he thought about the environment. And one of the things we could capture there that was sort of made you feel like you were in a time machine, which is what these sites really do. It's like stepping into a time machine. It wasn't just the visual, it was the sound. Like the cottonwood trees, those leaves make noise, and the mourning doves, right, that you can still hear calling there are the same ones that he heard and described. And so they transport you at their best. And I love living in the past. For better or for worse.
It really does. They are very transportive. Yeah, is that a word? Those visceral experiences that you have, they're so important. I think in talking about some of these things, a lot of your work, you find connections between people and place, and you're telling these untold stories. What opportunities do you see for parks in our next century to tell some of these richer stories and connect people in place?
You want to go first? Or
for you, Mo.
Oh, well, I'm always struck, and it's almost how what's the word I'm looking for? I guess precarious or ephemeral some of this stuff feels. The stories that I'm sometimes stumble on. I did a story on Charles Curtis, on the Native American vice president who served under Herbert Hoover, and he has a home, the only home of his, a beautiful home in Topeka, Kansas, and it was just a couple, Don and Nova Cottrell, who are both dead now, but they knew that this house had significance. The wrecking ball was ready for it. They bought it, and they weren't rich, and they kept working to earn the money to restore it. And now, once again, it's on the auction block. But something like that, you think, well, thank God it was saved. It's still here because he's an important figure. And that home is a pretty darn good way to learn about this piece of largely forgotten history, not just about his vice presidency, but about the Kaw Indians. And so everyone here knows there are plenty of opportunities.
Yeah, no, that's a wonderful example of you know, a historic place that, you know, if it isn't for those people who are those champions, it could be forgotten.
Yeah.
Are there examples that you can think of as well, David? Or yeah, David, yeah.
Yeah, I remember on that trip to Yellowstone and Grand Teton with my parents and my brother and my sister, when we pulled up to Grand Teton, saw that majestic landscape. But one of the things we noticed too is that, oh, wait a minute, there weren't any visitors that looked like us as Latinos. And there weren't any rangers that looked like us. And then when we found out there were grizzly bears in the park, it was, oh no, we got to go back to Texas. That ain't happening, let's go. But it was a place, it was a welcoming place. And we found out that there's 10,000 years of human history, Native American history and homestead history and surveyor, and it's just fascinating, and the park came alive. You know, the stories that the Park Service as the nation's storyteller. Think about during the sesquicentennial of the Civil War. Publications never printed before Hispanics in the Civil War. That was important for me because I was the chief ranger at Appomattox Courthouse, where it ended. And I'm sitting in the parlor thinking, well, I know about Lee and Grant, but what about my Latino ancestors? Decades later, I knew exactly through a publication that was done on what my ancestors did in the Civil War. Native Americans in the Civil War, women in the Civil War, Asian Americans, et cetera. So the Park Service, and now with the 250th anniversary of the founding of our nation, think of the number of stories we are going to tell as a nation, stories that we haven't heard about. So that when kids in schools, and they look at history, oh, another history class or another exam, but when they see how history was made by their ancestors and the founding of this nation, Director Sams is leading that charge now, it will change their perspective about who they are, where they came from, most importantly, the role that their communities played in the founding of our nation.
Yeah, so important. And, you know, staying along those lines and sticking with you for a moment, I would, you know, I know that in your career, you played a big role in those early efforts of inclusion within the Park Service and thinking more about not just the people within the Park Service, but the people that are visiting the parks and how to make it more inclusive. And you and Bob, our former honoree, Bob Stanton, was also very instrumental in that process. Tell us a little bit more about those efforts. You know, how can we build on that and continue to tell those untold stories and those full stories?
Well, in a book that I published, I gave credit to all the directors that I've had the chance to get to know personally. Bob Stanton, the first African-American director, Fran Manella, the first female director, Director Jarvis, Director Hartzog, who was made the decision to bring in urban areas, because that's where the people were, and that's where underserved communities were. Director Sams now, and what he's doing with Native American communities and communities at large. So we have a unique opportunity based on the foundations that have been laid by former directors and the men and women of the National Park Service, but also NPCAs of the world. The National Park Foundations are strategic partners and stakeholders who also play a role in helping us to tell the stories, to be more inclusive, and what we do, how we do our business. The first questions that I would ask my staff to think about is, who haven't we not contacted? Who's not in the room that needs to be part of this conversation? These questions are critical, especially today, in light of what we're facing in society today. And the more people we can get to the table, be in the room and engaged, the better we are going to be in being more relevant, being more inclusive, and ensuring our workforce reflects the face of America, but most importantly, we're achieving the interest of the American people through their national park system.
Yeah. Very important. That piece, that's a piece that I can definitely relate to as well, and you know, appreciate all the work that you've done. And I think in doing that, you mentioned before, you know, how the parks can kind of come alive for you. You know, I think it's an important way with these types of efforts and inclusion that the parks can come alive for a broader segment of our country. Mo, are there examples for you personally where the parks have come alive for you? Maybe more
Well,
so?
I would just love to talk about our favorite rangers. I mean, I remember, you know, a ranger, an interpreter, right? When you go to these sites, especially the National Historic Sites or the battlefield, the monuments, I mean, that makes so much of a difference. Has anyone, he left there, but there was this legendary ranger at Fort McHenry in Baltimore, Ranger Vince. Does anybody know this ranger? This guy's incredible. He was,
somebody in the back.
you know, yeah, I mean, off the charts. I mean, I did something on the War of 1812 and for our weekday show on CBS, and I could not believe, I thought, I just need to just sit back. This guy is doing everything, telling the story, bringing it alive. Or at, there's a ranger, Steve Adelson, at the Little Bighorn Battlefield National Monument. And he tells the story of that battle, of Custer's last stand, and does it, I think, quite well from both perspectives. I mean, you really, you know, it's a talk that I think was 40 minutes and certainly didn't feel long, but it's a real performance. And I was just at the Martin Van Buren site. I mean, no one wants to visit Martin Van Buren's site, but go, it's great. It's the first house in Kinderhook, New York that had indoor plumbing. I mean, he was very fussy, but it has, it has a toilet of like this blue Chinese marble. I mean, the toilet is amazing, and it's from the 1840s. But Zach Anderson is so great there. So I remember these different rangers that have really just completely reanimated these sites.
That's so important. Our rangers, the efforts in interpretation. David, that was another thing I know that you've thought a lot about and that you worked on with Bob and others on the interpretation of our parks and ensuring that you have, you know, great people, you have the untold stories. Can you speak a little bit more to some of your work in that realm?
Yeah, I with 8 grandkids and my wife, I'm glad to see her, of my kindergarten classmate, high school sweetheart, and bride of 43 years, so I had to get that in.
Wow.
I checked that box,
So
right?
wonderful.
Okay, good. No, but I think it really does take a village to tell the story. And the Park Service cannot and should not. I mean, this storyteller right here, oh my goodness. And when you bring people of like minds in a room, you'd be amazed at what you can do. It's leveraging capacity and building capacity. But we've got to go after the kids. We have to make national parks and the stories that they contain relevant. We have to help them see themselves in the green and gray, or as staff members of NPCA or the National Park Foundation, the National History Academy and other organizations, see themselves in these places because we're not there yet. Yeah. And we have a mutual responsibility as park lovers and supporters to be inclusive, again, to ask the question, who's not here? Yeah. And who do we need to call? And so I applaud Teresa and NPCA and her amazing team for being those partners and have answered the call. I know when I called, they were there and supportive. So thank you, Teresa, and to your amazing team for a continued job well done.
Thank you. Yes.
You know, in terms of making these sites resonate with younger people so that they see themselves or see their relationship to them. I remember 20 years ago going to the Alexander Hamilton site. It moved in Manhattan. I can't remember where it was at first. It was farther uptown. And I mean, it was like you could hear a tumbleweed. It's like going through, no one was there. Then the musical happened, Hamilton. And now it's just exploding. I mean, it's just, there's so many people there and it's such a vital place, and I've visited it since then. So, I mean, basically, I think all you need to do is get Lin-Manuel Miranda to write 461 musicals, a musical for each, pertinent to each site, and you'll have everyone there.
That makes perfect sense. Teresa, can we do that? Okay, all right. We'll work on that. We'll work on that. Well, we just have a few minutes left, but what would each of you say that our guests and advocates that are here tonight, and also those listening from home, could do to ensure that the parks remain meaningful and places where all the resources can thrive and where we all can thrive, and that the parks are thriving into the next century? Who wants to take that one first?
That's you. You ran the place, so you do it.
Well, I think, and probably Chuck would probably say this too, we can't do it by ourselves. The American public needs to continue to be engaged and involved. National parks just don't happen by themselves. They take community support and state support and national support, and working with our colleagues in Congress and the President to make these special places a reality. Yeah. It's important for the reason that I mentioned earlier. All it takes is one visit, one experience that could change a life. And so now Melissa's role and I, along with our daughter and son and daughter-in-law and 8 grandkids, is to build a 3rd generation to wear the green and gray. And if we can do that, I'm done. Thank you. Thank you.
That would be an incredible legacy to leave. And what would you say, Mo, in terms of how can we help parks thrive into the next century?
Well, you know, it seems to me that visiting them is really the big answer, right? And I know that some of them, as discussed, are strained for resources, but I think some of the lesser known sites, I mean, I've tried to use television and stories associated with these sites to drive more traffic. That's certainly one of my motivations, frankly. And when I'm choosing stories and thinking I'd rather do this because I think this is more deserving and may make a difference to its future. But I think probably the best thing is for people to visit, because I imagine lawmakers will notice that. We'll take notice.
Yes, absolutely. We had a bunch of advocates up on the Hill today, and we have so many of those people, as you described, David, that have been the instigators, the people that made some of these parks happen, and some of the future parks that we're working on. And you know, it's just such great advice and such great insight, you know, to talk about these places in this way. Is there anything else that either of you would like to share as we close out for the evening about your experiences with the parks?
Oh, well, I was going to share about my experience here tonight, that I learned from Senator Braun that August 15th in southern Indiana is the beginning of squirrel hunting season.
Oh, okay. Very important.
And November 1st is when the rabbits.
Okay, that's very good, yeah.
I got that right, yeah?
Important to know, important to know. David, anything else you'd like?
Yeah, in closing, and this is true for me, it doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter what your family's financial status is. That doesn't matter. If you can dream it, you can achieve it. Thank you.
Thank you both. Well, we are just about at time. I know I'm speaking for most folks here that I wish we could continue talking and continue sharing stories. But just want to say thank you again, both of you, for being here, and congratulations on being our Centennial Leadership Award winners.
It's a great honor. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you.
I hope you were inspired by tonight's event. Each of us can make a difference, whether you write your member of Congress or invite a friend to join you on a park visit. thank you for joining us this evening. This celebration just wouldn't have been the same without you. And don't forget to put in your final bids. The silent auction closes tomorrow at noon Eastern Time. And I want to leave you with one final video that celebrates you. From the Grand Canyon to Stonewall, thank you for sharing your photos with us. And now it's my great privilege to share them with all of you. Again, thank you for being with us now and throughout the year. Good night.
We go to the parks to stretch our legs, expand our minds, and lift our spirits. We marvel at the depths of the canyons and the heights of the stars. We go to the parks to be together, to strengthen our bonds, and to make new friends, to feel the sand and lava and snow and rocks beneath our feet, and the sun and wind on our faces. We stand in places of profound history and honor those who show us what perseverance truly is. We go to the parks to find answers and lose ourselves, to learn the true definition of awe and savor the moment so we never forget. The parks tell our stories, even when we don't have the words. We treasure the places and the moments. Then, now, and for years to come. They are more than 400 of our favorite places that connect us as a family, community, and a nation. We go to the parks to say, I was here. I was a part of it all.